Section 1. The hanging on the roof. Wind hissed through the empty street, dragging grit across the hard-packed dirt. The air smelled of scorched timber. Above the old mercantile, a rope swayed, creaking against a beam. The blonde woman at its end turned slowly with the wind, her hair catching the last blaze of the afternoon sun like tarnished gold. No one moved closer than the hitching posts. They stood in a ragged half-circle, storekeepers, saloon girls, a boy clutching his mother's skirt, all with the same strained look, like they'd swallowed dry sand. Somewhere a shutter banged against the wall and stayed banging. Boot steps sounded from the far end of the street. Slow, steady, a tall figure, shoulders stooped from years under mountain skies, stepped into the open. His coat was the color of old smoke, his beard tangled with trail dust. He carried no gun. Only a worn walking stick rested in his right hand. The crowd parted without a word. He stopped beneath the mercantile's overhang and looked up. The woman's face was slack, her bare feet mottled with the cold. Over her head, charred boards framed a blackened brand mark burned into the wall. The letters were crooked but clear. Apache Beloved. The man's eyes narrowed. The wind pulled at his coat. From somewhere to the left, the saloon doors swung on their hinges, groaning. A cough rattled in the stillness. The rope creaked again, complaining under the weight. The deputy pushed forward, a broad man with sweat darkening the band around his hat. "Best you keep on walking, stranger," he said, keeping his voice low but tight. "This here's not from Medland." The man didn't answer. His gaze shifted from the rope to the scorched letters, tracing them like he'd seen them before. The deputy stepped in front of him. I said, "Whose work?" the man asked. His voice was dry as sun-baked rock. Murmurs rolled through the onlookers. A boy kicked at the dust, eyes down. One old man spit and turned away. The deputy's jaw worked. "Ain't your concern. You bringin' trouble with you." Beyond them, a gust lifted the woman's hair, showing a welt along her temple. The skin split, dark against the pale. The man's eyes followed it, then dropped to the street where a trail of dust marked fresh hoof prints. They led away between the livery and the blacksmith's shed, angling toward the canyon. The deputy stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ain't wise to go poking where you don't belong. These things got a way of sticking to a man." The man's hand tightened around his walking stick. He looked at the scorched letters again. The crowd's whispers grew softer, as if the wind itself had hushed to listen. "This wasn't the Apaches," he said. A long silence followed, the kind that makes the hair along the neck rise. Somewhere far off, a lone church bell gave a single, hollow strike. On the canyon ridge, the sunlight caught on something, a shape that shifted and vanished. The man lifted his head toward it, then stepped past the deputy, without a word. The rope above him groaned. The wind carried the smell of burning from hours past, the kind that clings to it long after the flames die. His boots found the hoof prints and followed them toward the canyon. Section 2. Tracks in the dust. The hoof prints cut a dark path through pale dust, each edge still sharp where iron had pressed. He moved with them, coat flaring with each step, the walking stick planting soundless into the powdery ground. Heat clung low over the earth. Cicadas screamed from thorn brush along the trail. A vulture wheeled overhead, its shadow sliding over him and away. The prints angled toward the canyon, narrowing where rock pressing on both sides. The wind funneled through here, dragging the smell of horses, sweat, and cold ashes. He crouched near a scuff in the dust, the mark of a boot heel, smaller than his, worn to the nails. 2 more steps, and the trail opened into a hollow where an old fire pit still breathed faint warmth. Blackened coals, 3 crushed cigarette butts, a strip of blue cloth snagged on a splintered log, faded, but the stitching was military. Beyond the fire pit, half buried in sand, lay a child's shoe. The leather was cracked at the toe, but the sole was clean, as though it had not walked far. Wind tugged at the cloth in his hand. His jaw tightened. A distant rustle, not the wind. He straightened, eyes sweeping the hollow. The cicadas had gone silent. The first rider came from behind a stand of mesquite, shotgun balanced across the saddle horn. The second appeared at his left, face wrapped in a red bandana. Neither spoke. The first leaned forward, eyes narrowed under the brim of his hat. The man shifted his stick to his left hand, stepping just enough to center them both in his view. A twitch from the rider's hand. The shotgun's barrel lifted. The man moved first. The walking stick struck the nearest rider's knee with a crack, sending him off the saddle. The second swung a pistol, but the stick caught his wrist before the hammer fell. The gun spun into the dust. The first man scrambled to his feet, drawing a knife. The stranger swept the stick low, catching the man behind the ankles, and dropped him flat. The rider with the red bandana turned to run, but his stirrup caught on the saddle. He tumbled hard, rolling into a thorn bush. Something flew from his pocket, landing near the fire pit. The stranger stooped and picked it up, a small hand-carved talisman. The wood worn smooth from years of handling. The carving was Apache, but wrong. The lines were off, the shapes mixed from two different clans. He turned it over in his palm. The smell of old cedar clung to it. A sound drifted from the canyon mouth. Faint at first, then clearer. Voices, women's voices, singing in a high, lilting rise and fall. The stranger's brow furrowed. No dust trail, no movement, just a sound. He took 2 steps toward the canyon, the talisman still in his fist. The song cut off. A rifle cracked. The bullet tore his sleeve and burned across his arm. He dropped to one knee, scanning the rocks above. Another shot. Chips of stone spat from the wall behind him. He ducked into the narrow cut between 2 boulders, boots sliding on loose shale. The canyon air was cooler here, carrying the scent of damp stone. Something shifted ahead, a breath, quick and shallow. He froze, letting his own breath settle. The sound came again, from deeper in the shadows. He moved forward 1 step at a time until the daylight thinned to a gray sliver. The air pressed close. In the darkness ahead, the breathing grew louder. Someone was waiting in there. Section 3. The truth beneath the mountain. A flicker of movement. The stranger's eyes adjusted. A small figure crouched against a jagged wall, knees pulled to his chest. An Apache boy, no more than 12, his face streaked with dust and fear. The boy's breath hitched when the stranger stepped closer. He pressed back into the stone, as if it might swallow him. "They not my people," the boy said, his voice raw. "They were faces like yours." A muffled thud came from the canyon mouth. Boots on rock. Then another. The stranger crouched low beside the boy. "How many?" The boy shook his head quickly, eyes darting toward the light. "They take the others." "Fort." The sound of metal on stone, a spur scraping as someone shifted outside. Shadows cut across the sliver of daylight, slow and searching. The stranger motioned the boy deeper into the tunnel. The air cooled, thick with the smell of damp clay. Somewhere deeper in the mountain, water dripped in a slow, steady rhythm. The deputy's voice rolled down the passage, edged with a mocking drawl. "Ain't much room to run in there, mountain man. We'll make it quick if you step out." The boy's eyes went wide at the name. Boots moved closer. 6, maybe 7. The scuff of leather, the faint click of hammers drawn back. The stranger gripped his walking stick, feeling the worn notches along its shaft. His breathing slowed. When the first shape filled the entrance, he swung, with cracked against skull. The man dropped without a sound. Another step forward, pistol leveled. The stranger drove the stick's end into his wrist. The gunshot roared inside the tunnel, deafening in the close space. The boys scrambled behind a fallen timber as men surged in, firing into the shadows. Sparks jumped off the rock walls. Dust exploded from the floor. The stranger moved like water between them. Low sweeps, quick strikes, each blow precise. A man's knee buckled. Another's jaw snapped sideways. The narrow passage turned the fight into a brawl of elbows and shouts. "Drive him out," the deputy barked. The stranger feinted left, then slipped through a side crack in the wall he'd felt earlier. It opened into a tight shaft that smelled of old gunpowder. He pulled the boy in after him. Above, dim light trickled through warped planks, the forgotten vent of a mine shaft. Men's voices echoed in the dark behind them, then faded. The stranger pushed upward, the boards groaning under his weight until they split and let him spill into cold morning air. The ridge above the canyon spread out in front of them. Below, the posse was fanning toward the trail, moving but not searching up here. The boy pointed east. Fort 2 days. Many there. Women. Children. The stranger's jaw tightened. He scanned the horizon, eyes catching on a line of black shapes against the pale sand. Old walls, half collapsed, barely visible through the morning haze. A fort. The boy hesitated. They have her. The stranger looked down sharply. Her. The boy nodded, gaze fixed on the ground. The pale one, hair like fire in the sun. The words hung in the thin air between them.